The mountain air chilled like a whisper of death against her skin. Even in late spring, the Colorado Rockies held their secrets in pockets of cold that warned the unprepared to stay away. Elena Diaz ignored the warning. She moved through the forest with practiced precision, each step carefully chosen, her breathing controlled and rhythmic. Nothing about her commanded attention, not the standard-issue hiking boots, worn jeans, or the simple black fleece that concealed a physique honed by years of discipline. She appeared, by all accounts, forgettable. And that was precisely the point. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The training grounds of Camp Chapman sprawled across the valley below, its perimeter marked by concertina wire that gleamed dully in the morning light. From her vantage point on the ridge, Elena could see the obstacle courses, the shooting ranges, and the cluster of buildings where America's elite warriors were forged in the crucible of specialized training. A place she knew intimately, though she'd never officially existed within its records. She checked her watch, an analog luminox with a scratched face that had accompanied her through 3 continents and more close calls than she cared to remember. The meeting was set for 0800 hours. Major Thomas Gordon would arrive at the northeastern observation point in approximately 27 minutes. She had deliberately arrived 2 hours early to secure the area and establish multiple exit routes. Old habits died hard, if they died at all. Elena settled behind a fallen pine, her body melding with the shadows and forest debris. From her rucksack, she removed a pair of compact binoculars and scanned the training grounds methodically. The Green Berets were already up, running their morning drills with the mechanical precision that separated the elite from the merely qualified. She recognized the exercises, the same ones she had performed countless times, though never in the daylight, never with witnesses. Her mind drifted back to the message that had arrived 3 days ago, slipped under the door of her cabin in Wyoming where she'd been living quietly for the past 18 months. No digital footprint, no traceable delivery, just a handwritten note with coordinates, a time, and a simple phrase: "Keystone is compromised. The ghosts need you." It was signed with a small symbol resembling an owl, the personal mark of Major Gordon, her former handler, and the only person who knew she was still alive. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled her back to the present. Instinctively, her hand moved to the small kabar knife concealed at her ankle, the only weapon she carried these days. Through the binoculars, she spotted a solitary figure making his way up the forest path. Major Gordon was 20 minutes early, a calculated move she would have made herself. Trust no one, not even the person who arranged the meeting. She watched him pause at a clearing, his eyes scanning the surrounding forest with the trained perception of someone who had spent decades identifying threats before they materialized. Thomas Gordon had aged since she'd last seen him. His once jet-black hair now showed streaks of silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent furrows. But his posture remained unbending, his movements deliberate and efficient, the hallmarks of a career soldier who had faced death so many times that it had become merely another adversary to outmaneuver. Elena remained motionless, observing him for several more minutes. She checked for signs of surveillance, for the telltale bulge of a wire beneath his olive-drab jacket for any indication that this meeting was compromised. Finding none, she silently repositioned herself and began her approach, not directly toward him, but in a wide arc that would allow her to come up behind his position. "You're slipping, Thomas," she said quietly, materializing from the shadows 15 feet behind him. "I could have taken you 3 times in the last 90 seconds. Major Gordon didn't startle, didn't reach for a weapon. He simply turned slowly, a grim smile creasing his weathered face. "And I spotted you crossing the ridgeline 40 minutes ago. You're favoring your left side. Old wound acting up?" Elena's face remained impassive, but internally she acknowledged his observation. The shrapnel wound from Kandahar had never fully healed, and on cold mornings like this it made itself known. "Why am I here, Major? I thought we had an understanding." "We did. Things change." He gestured to a fallen log. "Sit with me, Elena. This isn't a quick conversation." She remained standing, her eyes never leaving his. "I prefer to keep my options open." Gordon nodded once, understanding perfectly. "Operation Blackfish has been compromised. 3 of our deep cover assets have gone dark in the past month. No bodies, no communication, just gone." Elena felt a cold that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Blackfish had been her operation, a network of non-official cover operatives placed in positions to monitor terrorist financing across Southeast Asia. She had built it from nothing, recruited every asset personally, established the communications protocols. It had been her masterpiece before she'd been declared killed in action. "That's not possible," she said finally. "The protocols were designed to withstand compromise. Even if one cell was exposed, the others would remain secure. Unless someone knew how you think. Unless someone had access to your methods." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The implication hung in the air between them. Elena's mind raced through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. "Matthews," she said finally, naming her former second-in-command. "He's the only one who had enough insight." Gordon's expression confirmed her suspicion. "We thought so too, until we found him 3 weeks ago in a Bangkok hotel room. Professional job. No traces. Whoever did it knew exactly who he was and how to get to him." Elena paced a small circle, processing the information. Matthews had been good, one of the best. If someone had gotten to him, they were dealing with a level of threat that exceeded standard operational parameters. You could have sent a secure communique. Why bring me in personally after all this time? Because the last transmission we received from our station chief in Jakarta contained a single phrase, "Shadow 7 has returned." Gordon watched her carefully as he spoke, gauging her reaction. Elena went completely still. Shadow 7 had been her operational designation during a classified series of extractions in North Korea. Missions so black that even within the Special Activities Division, they were spoken of only in whispers. That name, that identity, had been buried with her official death notification. No one outside the highest echelons of command should have known it existed. "That's not possible," she repeated, but the certainty had drained from her voice. "That's what I said." Gordon finally sat on the log, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. "But then I started pulling threads. 3 months ago, someone accessed the sealed files on the Pyongyang extraction, the operation where you earned that call sign. The access came through Director Harlow's credentials, except the director was in Geneva at a security conference at the time." Elena's mind was already 3 steps ahead, analyzing implications, cataloging potential threats. Digital footprint? None that our people could trace. Whoever did this knows our systems from the inside. Gordon pulled a small metal case from his jacket pocket. "I'm not here officially, Elena. The agency doesn't know about this meeting. As far as they're concerned, you died in that explosion in Karachi 3 years ago. Then why are you here? Because someone is hunting ghosts. And you're the best ghost I've ever known." Gordon opened the case, revealing a small data drive and what appeared to be a standard government ID. "This contains everything we have on the compromised operations, personnel files on those who've disappeared, and the last known locations of the remaining Blackfish assets." Elena made no move to take it. "I'm retired, Thomas. I paid my dues, more than paid them." "Did you?" His voice had an edge now. "You walked away, Elena. In the middle of a war that hasn't ended, you decided you'd had enough and orchestrated your own extraction. You left people behind, people who trusted you." The accusation struck with precision, finding the guilt she carried like a second skin. "I completed my objectives. 23 missions, Thomas. No failed extractions, no compromised assets. I served. And now your people are dying." Gordon stood, closing the distance between them. His voice softened. "I'm not here to drag you back. I'm here because there are 5 operatives still alive who don't know they've been burned. 5 people who trusted you to create a system that would keep them safe." Elena looked away, her gaze finding the distant peaks where snow still clung stubbornly to the stone. She had promised herself she was done, that the cabin in Wyoming with its solitude and silence would be her final posting. She had learned to sleep through the night again, had gone weeks without reaching for the weapon that was no longer beneath her pillow. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Find them before whoever is hunting them does. Bring them home. Then disappear again if that's what you want." Gordon held out the case. "I can give you 72 hours of operational support before questions start being asked that I can't answer." Elena stared at the case for a long moment before taking it. Her decision made the instant she'd heard the words, Shadow 7. Some ghosts couldn't be outrun, no matter how far or fast you traveled. I'll need equipment. Clean credentials. Gordon nodded. There's a locker at Denver International. Long-term storage, key is in the case. Everything you need is there. Non-attributable. Untraceable. And if I find who's behind this? His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the answer he wouldn't voice aloud. This wasn't a capture mission. This was cleanup. The kind of operation that would never appear in any file, on any server, in any briefing room. Do what you do best, he said simply. Elena slipped the case into her pocket. I'll make contact through the old channels when I have something. Gordon nodded once, then hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. The message from Jakarta. It wasn't just the reference to Shadow 7. There was more. Elena waited, a sense of foreboding settling over her like the mountain shadows. The full message read, Shadow 7 has returned. She remembers Incheon. Gordon watched her carefully. Does that mean something to you? Incheon. The name hit her like a physical blow. Not a place, but a person. A North Korean counterintelligence officer she'd encountered during her last extraction operation. Colonel Min Young-jin, call sign Incheon. The man who'd almost captured her, who'd come closer than anyone to unmasking Shadow 7. The man she thought she'd killed during her escape. No. She lied smoothly. It doesn't mean anything. Gordon studied her face, and she knew he didn't believe her. But he also knew better than to push. In their world, some secrets remained personal, even between colleagues who had trusted each other with their lives. 72 hours, he reminded her. After that, you're on your own. I always have been, Elena replied, already turning to leave. I'll contact you when it's done. She moved back into the forest, her footsteps silent on the pine needle floor. By the time Gordon thought to look for her again, she had vanished completely, a shadow returning to darkness, a ghost slipping back into the world of the dead to protect the living. The Denver International Airport hummed with the controlled chaos of a major transit hub. Thousands of travelers moved through its vast terminals like blood cells through arteries, each following their predetermined path, oblivious to the currents flowing around them. Elena moved among them, another anonymous face in the crowd, her appearance already altered from the woman who had met Gordon on the mountain. Gone was the hiking gear, replaced by the business-casual attire of a mid-level corporate traveler. Her dark hair, once pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in carefully styled waves around a face subtly transformed by cosmetics that highlighted different features than her natural bone structure suggested. The slight limp from her old injury had disappeared, discipline overriding physical discomfort. She located the storage facility in the airport's East Terminal, a nondescript business catering to travelers who needed to leave items secured for extended periods. The key from Gordon's case fit perfectly, opening locker 347 to reveal a medium-sized hard case and a leather messenger bag. Elena collected both items and made her way to the women's restroom at the far end of the terminal, the one with the broken security camera she'd already noted on her initial sweep. Inside a handicapped stall, she opened the hard case. The contents were precisely what she needed. A Glock 19 with suppressor, 3 extra magazines, a Kabar tactical knife identical to the one already strapped to her ankle, a satellite phone with encryption capabilities, $50,000 in mixed currencies, and 3 sets of identification documents under different names. The leather bag contained a laptop with specialized security features and a change of clothes appropriate for multiple environments. She quickly transferred the essential items to her own luggage, hiding the weapons in specially designed compartments that would defeat standard security screenings. The hard case itself she disassembled, its components distributed across 3 separate trash receptacles on her way out of the terminal. At a coffee shop with decent internet security and poor camera coverage, Elena opened the laptop and inserted the data drive Gordon had given her. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the preliminary encryption with the personal code she and Gordon had established years ago. The files populated her screen: personnel dossiers, operation parameters, last known locations, communication protocols. She studied them methodically, her mind cataloging relevant details while discarding extraneous information. 3 operatives gone dark. James Mercer, station chief in Jakarta. Sonia Patel, financial intelligence specialist in Singapore. Michael Chen, deep cover in Macau's banking system. 2 more, still active but potentially compromised. David Reese, operating a shipping company in Manila. Karen Winslow, posing as an NGO director in Kuala Lumpur. 5 lives hanging in the balance. 5 people who had trusted her system to keep them safe. Elena focused on the most recent disappearance, Michael Chen. According to the file, he had missed 3 scheduled check-ins before being classified as potentially compromised. His last known location was a high-end casino in Macau, where he had been tracking financial transactions linked to a suspected terrorist financing network. She pulled up surveillance footage from the casino, provided in the file, grainy images showing Chen entering the building at 9:47 p.m. local time, moving through the main gambling floor, and then nothing. No footage of him leaving, no record of him returning to his apartment or accessing any of his established communication channels. Something caught her attention in the background of one frame. A figure at the bar, partially obscured but watching Chen with unmistakable intent. Elena enhanced the image, focusing on the reflection in the mirrored wall behind the bar. Though distorted, she could make out enough of the observer's features to recognize a face she had hoped never to see again. Colonel Min Young-jin. Elena closed her eyes briefly, memories flooding back with unwelcome clarity. The North Korean facility, the extraction gone wrong, the running firefight through underground tunnels. Incheon's face in the muzzle flash of her weapon, as she fired what should have been a killing shot before detonating the charges that collapsed the escape tunnel behind her. She had never verified the kill, an amateur mistake driven by the necessity of getting her asset out before the entire complex went into lockdown. She had assumed, had wanted to believe, that no one could have survived the tunnel collapse and subsequent ammunition detonation. She had been wrong. Working quickly, Elena cross-referenced known associates of Colonel Min, seeking connections to the other compromised operatives. The pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. In each location where an operative had disappeared, intelligence reports noted the presence of individuals with ties to North Korean counterintelligence. This wasn't random. This was methodical revenge. Incheon hunting down the network she had built, seeking the architect who had nearly killed him and dismantled his operation. Shadow 7. Elena's next decision was tactical. The 2 remaining operatives needed to be extracted immediately, but approaching them directly could trigger whatever surveillance Incheon had established. Karen Winslow in Kuala Lumpur was the more vulnerable target. Her NGO work made her movements predictable and accessible. Within 20 minutes, Elena had booked a flight to Malaysia under one of her new identities, established a digital presence that would withstand cursory background checks, and created a cover story that would explain her presence in Winslow's orbit. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who knew exactly how little time remained before the next disappearance. As she prepared to leave the coffee shop, her satellite phone vibrated once, Gordon's signal that the operational window was open. She sent a single text in response, confirmative on Incheon, proceeding to KL for package retrieval. Quote, his reply came seconds later. Timeline accelerated. Jakarta asset confirmed, terminated. 48 hours remaining. Elena deleted the messages, powering down the phone. James Mercer was dead, which meant the clock was ticking even faster for the others. Incheon was working his way through her network with ruthless efficiency, following a pattern she herself had designed. Eliminate the hub locations first, then move to the peripheral assets. She gathered her belongings and moved purposefully toward the International Departures Terminal. As she walked, she shed the last remnants of the woman who had lived quietly in Wyoming, embracing once again the identity she had thought buried. Her posture shifted subtly, her awareness expanded to encompass every detail of her surroundings. Her mind calculated threats and responses with machine-like precision. Shadow 7 was back in the field, and this time, she would make no mistakes. The overnight flight to Kuala Lumpur gave Elena 12 uninterrupted hours to immerse herself in the operational details. While other passengers slept or watched movies, she methodically committed to memory every aspect of Karen Winslow's cover identity, daily routines, and communication protocols. The NGO director had been placed as a long-term asset, establishing legitimate humanitarian credentials while gathering intelligence on financial networks supporting extremist groups in Southeast Asia. What troubled Elena most was how precisely Incheon seemed to be targeting her network. The Blackfish operation had been compartmentalized specifically to prevent comprehensive compromise. Each operative knew only their immediate contacts and emergency protocols. The only person who understood the entire network structure had been Elena herself, which meant Incheon had access to information that should have died with her fake death in Karachi. Someone had betrayed her, had preserved the operational details she had worked so carefully to obscure. The list of people with that level of knowledge was vanishingly small. As the plane began its descent into Kuala Lumpur International Airport, Elena closed the laptop and focused on her immediate objectives. Locate Winslow, verify her status, extract her without alerting Incheon's surveillance, and transport her to a secure location. Then repeat the process with David Reese in Manila before the operational window closed completely. After that, find Incheon and finish what she had started in that North Korean tunnel 3 years ago. The humid air of Malaysia hit her like a physical wall as she exited the airport terminal. The familiar sense of street food, exhaust fumes, and tropical vegetation triggered a cascade of memories. Previous operations, different identities, missions long completed. She flagged down a taxi, giving the address of a mid-range hotel in the city center that offered reasonable security and minimal documentation requirements. In her room, Elena established basic counter-surveillance measures before showering away 20 hours of travel. As the water cascaded over her, she examined the network of scars that mapped her operational history across her body. The knife wound from Beirut, the bullet graze from Yemen, the burn marks from the explosion in Karachi that had provided cover for her extraction from the field. And on her left side, just below her ribs, the jagged reminder of her encounter with Incheon, shrapnel from a grenade he had thrown during their final confrontation. Fragments of metal that still occasionally worked their way to the surface of her skin like memories that refused to stay buried. She dressed in clothes appropriate for Kuala Lumpur's business district, conservative but stylish, designed to blend rather than stand out. According to the file, Winslow's NGO office was located in a commercial building off Jalan Ampang, with regular hours from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It was currently 2:17 p.m. local time. Before approaching directly, Elena needed to establish the security situation. She took a circuitous route to the building, pausing at various points to observe patterns of movement, security personnel, camera positions. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious, but the absence of obvious surveillance often indicated more sophisticated monitoring. She entered a cafe across the street, ordering a coffee and selecting a seat with a clear view of the building entrance. Over the next 45 minutes, she identified 3 individuals whose behavior suggested professional surveillance: a food vendor whose cart never seemed to attract customers, a maintenance worker who had been cleaning the same section of sidewalk since her arrival, and a woman at a bus stop who had let 4 buses pass without boarding. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a capture team preparing to move. Elena abandoned her coffee and moved quickly to a position that would give her line of sight to the NGO's specific office windows on the 4th floor. Through compact binoculars disguised as sunglasses, she could see movement inside. Winslow at her desk, apparently normal, working at her computer, but something was off. The curtains in the office were drawn back completely, a violation of the security protocols Elena had established for all Blackfish operatives. Winslow knew better than to sit with her back to an exposed window. Either she had become dangerously complacent, or she was already compromised and serving as bait. Elena had to assume the worst. Direct approach was now impossible. She needed to intercept Winslow during her evening departure, create a controlled extraction scenario that would bypass the surveillance net Incheon had established. She retreated to a position that allowed observation of all potential exit routes from the building, continuing to catalog the surveillance team members as they repositioned throughout the afternoon. By 5:30 p.m., she had identified 5 operatives with high probability and 3 more possibles, a larger team than expected, suggesting Incheon anticipated resistance. At 5:47 p.m., Winslow emerged from the building's main entrance, moving with the relaxed posture of someone unaware of being watched. She turned toward the nearby light rail station, her usual route home according to the file. Elena moved parallel to her, maintaining visual contact while avoiding the sight lines of the surveillance team. The extraction point would need to be the light rail station itself, crowded enough to provide cover, with multiple exit routes and limited space for the surveillance team to maneuver. She increased her pace, intercepting Winslow's path just before the station entrance. Timing her approach perfectly, she deliberately collided with the other woman, sending a stack of folders Winslow was carrying scattering across the sidewalk. "I'm so sorry," Elena exclaimed, dropping to help gather the papers. As they both knelt, she whispered, "Shadow 7. Blackfish compromised. Nod if you understand." Winslow's face remained perfectly composed, showing only the mild annoyance of a busy professional delayed by a clumsy stranger. But she gave an almost imperceptible nod as she reached for a fallen document. "Bathroom inside the station," Elena continued, her voice barely audible over the street noise. 2 minutes. If I don't show, go to emergency extraction point Delta." Another nod, and then Winslow was gathering the last of her papers, offering a tight smile of professional forgiveness before continuing into the station. Elena remained kneeling for a moment longer, using the position to scan for reaction among the surveillance team. 2 of them had definitely noticed the interaction. The woman from the bus stop was speaking urgently into what appeared to be a cell phone, and one of the men was moving to follow Winslow into the station. Time to create a diversion. Elena moved quickly, calculating angles and timing. She pulled a small device from her pocket, an electromagnetic pulse generator designed to temporarily disrupt electronic systems. As she passed a maintenance panel near the station entrance, she activated the device and slipped it inside, where it would be hidden until its battery died. 30 seconds later, the station's lights flickered and died, emergency systems failing to engage due to the localized EMP. In the sudden darkness and confusion, Elena moved with practiced precision, navigating by memory and touch while the surveillance team struggled to adapt. She reached the women's bathroom just as Winslow was exiting a stall, clearly startled by the power failure. "With me," Elena whispered, gripping the other woman's arm firmly. "Exit through the service corridor, northeast corner." "Who are you?" Winslow demanded, her voice low but steady. "Shadow 7 was killed in Karachi." "Apparently not," Elena replied, guiding her toward the maintenance door at the back of the bathroom. "Gordon sent me. Blackfish is burned. Mercer is already dead." The name of her handler seemed to convince Winslow, who stopped resisting. "The others?" Quote, "Chen and Patel are missing. We're extracting Reese next." Elena picked the simple lock on the maintenance door with practiced efficiency. "Inchan is hunting us." Winslow's sharp intake of breath told Elena everything she needed to know. The name meant something to her. "Colonel Min? He's dead. He's very much alive and holding a grudge." The door opened to reveal a narrow service corridor. 2 hostels at the main entrance, 1 on the platform, 2 covering the street exit. "We're going through the loading dock." They moved quickly through the darkened corridor, Elena leading with confidence born from memorized floor plans. Behind them, she could hear the commotion as the surveillance team realized their target had vanished. "Why didn't you warn me earlier?" Winslow asked as they navigated past cleaning equipment and electrical panels. "We only confirmed the compromise 3 days ago. By then, 3 assets were already missing." Elena paused at a junction, listening for pursuit. "Your communication channels were potentially monitored. Direct contact was the only safe option." The loading dock was deserted, the power outage having sent the workers home early. Elena led Winslow to a maintenance access ladder that descended to street level away from the main exits. "Where are we going?" Winslow asked as they emerged into a narrow alley. "Safe house in Petaling Jaya. We'll hold there until extraction." Elena scanned the street before leading them toward a motorcycle parked inconspicuously between 2 delivery vans. "Can you still ride?" Winslow nodded. Her file had mentioned extensive motorcycle training for urban operations. "Take this." Elena handed her a helmet with an integrated communications system. "Follow the KL Shah Alam Expressway. I'll be right behind you in case we pick up a tail." As Winslow started the motorcycle, Elena moved to a second bike, partially hidden behind a dumpster. Within moments, both women were weaving through Kuala Lumpur's evening traffic, taking a deliberately complex route to identify any pursuit. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business and occupants changed frequently enough that new faces didn't raise questions. Elena secured the perimeter while Winslow checked the communications equipment that had been pre-positioned. Years of operational procedure took over, each woman falling into the rhythms of security protocols that had been drilled into them through training and experience. "Clean so far," Elena announced, completing her sweep for surveillance devices. "But we won't stay long. 12 hours, maximum." Winslow nodded, her professional composure finally cracking to reveal the strain beneath. "James is really dead?" "Confirmed this morning. Jen and Patel disappeared within the last 3 weeks." Elena began unpacking equipment from concealed compartments around the apartment. "I need to know if you've noticed anything unusual recently. Any security breaches, unexpected contacts, changes in routine surveillance?" Winslow considered the question carefully. "Nothing significant. Standard monitoring from local authorities, but nothing that suggested a targeted operation." She paused. "Until last week. We received a new volunteer at the NGO, a Korean-American doctoral student. Said all the right things, had perfect credentials, but something felt off." Description? Elena was already pulling up a secure database on her laptop. Male, early 30s, about 6 feet, athletic build. Called himself David Park. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing facial recognition databases through backdoor channels Gordon had provided. "This him." She turned the screen to show a surveillance photo. Winslow nodded. "That's him. Who is he?" "Park Jin-sung. North Korean intelligence, specialized in deep cover infiltration. He's one of Incheon's top operatives." Elena closed the laptop. "He was there to confirm your identity before the extraction team moved in." "How did they find me?" "My cover was solid. Legitimate NGO work, proper background, everything." Elena's expression darkened. "They found you because they knew exactly what to look for. Someone gave them the entire Blackfish playbook. All the protocols, all the cover methodologies." She met Winslow's gaze directly. "Someone who knew how I built the network." Understanding dawned in Winslow's eyes. "An inside job." "Has to be. The question is who?" Elena moved to the window, checking the street below through a narrow gap in the blinds. "Did Mercer ever discuss any concerns about the command structure? Any doubts about Gordon or anyone else at headquarters?" Winslow shook her head. "James was a true believer. He trusted the system completely." She hesitated. "There was one thing, though. About 6 months ago, he mentioned a security audit had been conducted on all our operations. Said it came from above Gordon's pay grade, director level. Elena filed this information away. The agency's upper echelons had always been a web of competing interests and agendas. If someone at that level was compromised, the implications went far beyond Blackfish. We need to move faster than anticipated," she decided. "Reese is in immediate danger if they've already identified you. I'm going to extract him personally while you head to the emergency fallback in Singapore." "Alone?" Winslow looked skeptical. "If Incheon's people are as embedded as you think, it's not up for debate." Elena's tone brooked no argument. "I created this mess. I'll fix it." "By getting yourself killed?" "Again?" Winslow's voice held a mixture of respect and frustration. "Your death in Karachi nearly broke the network. We lost our most experienced field commander, and for what? So you could disappear into retirement while the rest of us remained exposed?" The accusation stung, precisely because it contained elements of truth. Elena had orchestrated her extraction when the burden of command had become too heavy, when the nightmares had started lasting into her waking hours, when she couldn't remember who she was beneath the layers of cover identities. "That's not what happened," she said quietly. "Then what did happen?" "Because from where we stood, our commander abandoned ship the moment things got complicated." Elena turned to face her fully. "I was ordered out. Director Harlow himself signed the extraction papers. Said I'd become too valuable to risk in field operations. They wanted to put me behind a desk at Langley, analyzing other people's intelligence instead of gathering it myself. So you chose to die instead." "I chose freedom," Elena corrected. "The freedom to disappear completely. Gordon helped arrange it. A final operation that went catastrophically wrong, a body that couldn't be recovered, a heroic death in service to country. Her laugh held no humor. The perfect end to a decorated career. Winslow studied her, reassessing. And now you're back, because someone is using your playbook against you. Against us, Elena emphasized. I built Blackfish to withstand compromise. Someone dismantled those safeguards systematically. She checked her watch. We need to get moving. Your transport to Singapore leaves in 90 minutes. As they prepared to depart, Elena handed Winslow a small metal case. Emergency protocols, new identification, and enough cash to disappear permanently if necessary. If you don't hear from me within 72 hours, assume I've been compromised and activate the final contingency plan. Winslow took the case, her expression solemn. And Reese? I'll get him out or die trying. This time, Elena's voice held a promise. For real. They parted at the safe house, taking separate routes to minimize the chance of simultaneous capture. Elena watched Winslow disappear into the night traffic before turning toward her own destination, the private airfield where a chartered plane waited to take her to Manila. As she drove through the darkened streets of Kuala Lumpur, Elena's mind worked through the puzzle pieces. The precision of Incheon's attacks, the systematic dismantling of her network, the inside knowledge required to bypass her security protocols, all pointed to a betrayal at the highest levels. But why now? Why wait 3 years after her supposed death to target Blackfish? What had changed? The answer came to her as she approached the airfield, a cold certainty that settled in her stomach like lead. If Incheon believed she was still alive, if he was systematically eliminating her network to draw her out, then someone had told him she had survived Karachi. Someone who knew her extraction had been staged. Someone like Director Harlow who had signed the extraction papers himself. Or someone like Major Gordon, the only person who knew where to find her when Blackfish started unraveling. Elena's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Trust had always been a luxury in her profession, but now it felt like a liability she could no longer afford. As she approached the small private terminal, she made a decision. After extracting Reese, she wouldn't return to Gordon as planned. She would follow her own path to Incheon, uncovering the truth about the betrayal along the way. The chartered flight to Manila was a sleek Gulfstream with minimal crew, a pilot, co-pilot, and a single flight attendant who understood that discretion was part of the premium price. Elena spent the 2-hour journey reviewing everything she knew about David Reese's operation in the Philippines. Reese operated a legitimate shipping company that specialized in small cargo transport throughout the South China Sea. His position gave him access to shipping manifests, crew movements, and port security, all valuable intelligence for tracking terrorist supply lines and personnel movements. According to the file, his cover remained intact with no suspicious indicators in recent communications. But Elena knew better than to trust the official assessment. If Incheon had compromised Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur, Manila was undoubtedly next, if not already under surveillance. She would need to approach with extreme caution. The plane touched down at Manila's secondary airport just after midnight local time. Elena deplaned wearing the identity of a Canadian business consultant, her appearance again subtly altered, lighter hair, glasses, a more confident stride that suggested corporate authority. She bypassed the main terminal, using a private entrance reserved for charter passengers that minimized exposure to security cameras. A car was waiting, another arrangement from Gordon's operational support package. The driver asked no questions, simply confirming her destination before pulling away from the terminal. Manila's nighttime streets pulsed with an energy that never fully dissipated, even in the early morning hours. Elena directed the driver to a location 3 blocks from her actual destination, maintaining operational security even when time was critical. After dismissing the car, she moved on foot through side streets, conducting counter-surveillance maneuvers out of ingrained habit. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious, but the absence of obvious surveillance often concerned her more than its presence. Incheon was too good to make obvious mistakes. Reese's apartment was in a mid-range building that catered to expatriate business people, secure enough to provide basic protection, but not so exclusive as to attract attention. Elena approached from the service entrance, bypassing the night security guard with the confidence of someone who belonged. The service elevator took her to the 14th floor. She exited carefully, scanning the hallway before proceeding to apartment 1407. Rather than knocking directly, she used a small device to detect electronic emissions from inside, checking for surveillance equipment that might have been planted. The readings showed normal levels for standard consumer electronics, television, computer, mobile phone. No suspicious frequencies that would indicate professional surveillance equipment. Still, caution was paramount. She knocked in the pattern that had been established as the emergency contact protocol for all Blackfish operatives. 3 rapid knocks, pause, 2 slow knocks. No response. She repeated the pattern, slightly louder. The silence from within the apartment sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the building's aggressive air conditioning. Elena reached for the compact lock-picking tools concealed in her belt, working quickly to defeat the standard commercial lock. The door opened to darkness and the stillness of an empty space. She entered cautiously, weapon drawn, moving with practiced precision through the apartment's layout. Living room clear. Kitchen clear. Bathroom empty. The bedroom door was partially open, revealing rumpled sheets but no occupant. Nothing immediately suggested a struggle. No overturned furniture, no signs of forced entry, no blood spatter or bullet holes. But on the nightstand, placed with deliberate precision, sat a small metallic object that made Elena's blood run cold. A North Korean military challenge coin, the same one Colonel Min had carried during their final confrontation in Pyongyang. Next to it lay a folded piece of paper. Elena approached carefully, using a pen to unfold the note without touching it directly. The message was handwritten in precise, elegant script. Shadow 7. 3 years is a long time between meetings. Your operatives have been most cooperative in helping me understand your methods. Mr. Reese volunteered to deliver a personal message. He said to tell you that your ghost story is ending. I look forward to writing the final chapter together. Incheon Elena carefully photographed both the note and the challenge coin before conducting a more thorough search of the apartment. Reese's laptop was missing, as was his phone. His go bag, the emergency kit all operatives maintained for rapid evacuation, remained untouched in its hiding place behind the air conditioning vent, suggesting he'd been taken by surprise or hadn't perceived the threat until it was too late. The timing was the most troubling element. If Incheon had already taken Reese, it meant his operation was moving faster than anticipated. The methodical pattern she had detected was accelerating, suggesting either growing confidence or increasing desperation. Elena secured the apartment, leaving everything as she had found it except for the note and coin, which she took with her. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky, the city stirring to life around her. Her operational window was closing rapidly. With Reese captured and likely being interrogated, Elena needed to move quickly to contain the damage and locate Incheon before he could disappear with his prisoners. She found a secure location to contact Gordon using the encrypted satellite phone's text function rather than voice communication. Package in Manila compromised. Evidence of Incheon on site. Proceeding to secondary objective. Quote, the response came moments later. Return to exfil point immediately. Operational status changed. Repeat. Return immediately. Elena stared at the message, her instincts screaming warning. Gordon knew the protocols. Even a compromised operation would continue until all assets were accounted for. There was no operational reason to recall her when 2 agents remained missing and a third had just been captured, unless Gordon himself was the compromise. She sent one final message. Understood. Proceeding to exfil point Alpha. It was a deliberate misdirection. Alpha was the primary extraction point at Manila's main airport. She had no intention of going anywhere near it. Instead, she powered down the satellite phone completely, removing its battery to prevent any potential tracking. From now on, she would operate completely off the grid, without the support infrastructure Gordon had provided. Elena moved through Manila with renewed purpose, heading not toward any extraction point but deeper into the city's commercial district. If Incheon was operating in the Philippines, he would need a secure location with privacy, sound insulation, and multiple access points, somewhere to hold and interrogate prisoners without attracting attention. She knew exactly the kind of place he would choose, because she would have chosen something similar herself. The question was how to find it without drawing attention to her search. The answer came in the form of a memory, a conversation with Reese during his operational briefing 3 years earlier. He had mentioned a property his shipping company used occasionally for specialized storage, a euphemism for sensitive cargo that required discretion. The warehouse was located in a semi-industrial area near the port, with private access and minimal neighboring businesses. It was exactly the type of facility Incheon would find useful, and it had the added advantage of being connected to Reese's legitimate business operations, a connection that would have been discovered during surveillance of his activities. Elena made her way to the port district as the city fully awakened around her. The morning traffic provided excellent cover, thousands of commuters creating a human tide that made individual tracking nearly impossible. She abandoned her business attire in a public restroom, changing into the clothes of a dock worker, jeans, work boots, and a nondescript t-shirt that would blend perfectly in the industrial port area. The warehouse was easy enough to locate, a concrete structure with minimal windows, and a loading dock, designed for discreet transfers. What concerned Elena was the complete absence of visible security. No guards, no cameras, no signs of occupation at all. Either Incheon was being extraordinarily cautious, or this was not his base of operations. She conducted a careful reconnaissance, circling the building from a distance before approaching more directly. Using a drainage culvert that ran alongside the property, she gained access to the rear of the warehouse without exposing herself to any potential observers. A service door showed signs of recent use. The lock was well maintained, and the hinges were clean of the rust that affected other metal surfaces in the humid port environment. Elena picked the lock with practiced efficiency, slipping inside with her weapon drawn. The interior was dim, illuminated only by thin shafts of light penetrating through high, dirty windows. Shipping containers were arranged in neat rows, creating a labyrinth of metal corridors. The air was still and stale, carrying the faint scent of machine oil and sea salt. Elena moved silently through the warehouse, checking each container, looking for any sign of recent activity. Most were sealed with heavy padlocks, showing layers of dust and corrosion, clearly untouched for months or years. But one container near the center of the warehouse was different. Its lock was new, the metal gleaming in the dim light. More importantly, a thin electrical cable ran from beneath the container door, connecting to a power junction on the warehouse wall. Elena approached cautiously, all senses alert for any sign of a trap. The container showed no external markings or identification numbers. Another anomaly in a facility where everything else was meticulously categorized and labeled. She pressed her ear against the metal surface, listening for any sound from within. Nothing. Either the container was empty, or its occupants were incapacitated, or it was soundproofed. The lock was high security, beyond her ability to pick quickly without specialized tools. But the hinges were external and standard commercial grade. Elena removed a small canister from her pocket, a chemical compound that reacted with metal, rapidly deteriorating its structural integrity. She applied it carefully to each hinge pin, waiting the necessary 60 seconds for the reaction to take effect before applying pressure with a pry tool. The first pin gave way silently, followed by the second and third. With the hinges compromised, Elena was able to create a gap large enough to see inside the container without fully opening the door. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The interior had been converted into a makeshift interrogation room. A chair bolted to the floor sat in the center, restraints attached to its arms and legs. A small table held an array of implements whose purpose was unmistakable. But the chair was empty, the restraints hanging open. On the far wall, a message had been painted in what appeared to be dried blood. "Too late again, Shadow 7. Your ghosts are coming home with me." And below it, a single word that made Elena's heart stop: Wyoming. The word Wyoming detonated in Elena's mind like a precision charge. Her cabin, her sanctuary, the place where she had finally found a measure of peace, compromised. And worse, Incheon knew about it, which meant one of two things. Either Gordon had betrayed her completely, or Incheon had extracted the information from one of her captured operatives. Either way, the message was clear. This wasn't just about dismantling Blackfish anymore. This was personal. Incheon was going after her directly, using her people as bait to lure her back to where she was most vulnerable. Elena exited the container and the warehouse with mechanical precision, her mind already calculating variables, timelines, probabilities. If Incheon had taken Reese recently, he wouldn't have had time to reach Wyoming yet. International transport of unwilling prisoners required resources, planning, specialized equipment. Even with Incheon's considerable capabilities, it would take time. Time she could use. She needed to get back to the United States immediately, but her operational window with Gordon had officially closed. The standard extraction protocols were compromised. Commercial flights were too slow and left too many digital fingerprints. Private charters required documentation she couldn't risk providing. That left only one viable option, one she had hoped never to use again: the Phoenix Protocol. The ultimate contingency plan, designed for situations where an operative was completely cut off, with no viable extraction path through official channels. It was expensive, dangerous, and burned bridges that could never be rebuilt. But it was also untraceable, operating completely outside government oversight. Elena moved through Manila's crowded streets, her mind focused on the sequence of actions required to activate Phoenix. First, she needed to access funds, significant amounts that couldn't be traced back to any government agency. She located an innocuous internet cafe in a busy commercial district, selecting a terminal with poor camera coverage and good sightlines to all entrances. Using a series of proxy servers and encryption protocols, she accessed a digital wallet that existed in the gray spaces between legitimate financial systems. The balance displayed made her grimace. 2 million in cryptocurrency, the accumulated insurance policy she had built over years of field operations. Funds skimmed from operational budgets, diverted from asset payments, extracted from the shadow economy she had infiltrated. Not stolen, she had always told herself. Just redirected. An insurance policy against precisely this kind of situation, where official channels were closed and survival depended on resources beyond government control. With quick, efficient keystrokes, she transferred funds to a series of predetermined accounts, activating the financial side of Phoenix. Within hours, the machinery would begin moving. Transportation arranged, documentation prepared, weapons secured. All without direct communication, all through automated systems and dead drops established years earlier. The next part was trickier. She needed to contact Winslow and warn her about the Wyoming connection without exposing either of them to further compromise. The Singapore extraction point might already be under surveillance if Gordon was truly compromised. Elena left the internet cafe, moving to a different location where she purchased a burner phone with cash. She composed a text message in a cipher she and Winslow had established during their operational history together. Golden Bridge collapsed. Lone Star rising. Home fires burning. Translation: extraction plan compromised. Proceed to Texas alternative. Wyoming location known to hostiles. She sent the message to a commercial paging service that Blackfish operatives used for emergency communications, antiquated technology that was often overlooked in an age of sophisticated digital surveillance. Within minutes, the message would be broadcast to a pager Winslow carried as part of her NGO cover identity. With Phoenix activated and Winslow warned, Elena turned her attention to her own extraction. The protocol specified a fishing vessel departing from Manila Bay within the next 6 hours, a legitimate commercial operation that occasionally transported more than just seafood. As she made her way toward the designated meeting point, Elena reflected on how quickly her carefully constructed retirement had unraveled. 3 days ago, she had been Elena Bishop, reclusive cabin owner in Wyoming, a woman who hiked, read voraciously, and volunteered at the local library twice a week. A woman who had nightmares but was learning to live with them, who had begun to believe that the past could stay buried if you piled enough present moments on top of it. Now she was Shadow 7 again, moving through crowds with the hyper-awareness of someone who knew precisely how many ways a person could disappear in plain sight. The transition had been seamless, automatic, muscle memory reasserting itself as if the intervening years had been nothing more than an extended mission briefing. That realization troubled her more than she cared to admit. How thin was the veneer of normalcy she had constructed? How fragile the peace she thought she'd found? The rendezvous point was a small dock on the less commercial side of Manila Bay, where fishing vessels too modest for the main commercial piers loaded and unloaded their catches. Elena spotted her contact immediately, a weathered Filipino man in his 60s, mending nets beside a boat that had seen better decades. The identification marker was subtle but unmistakable. A red bandana tied around his left wrist, the agreed-upon signal in the Phoenix Protocol. She approached directly, no pretense necessary with someone who understood the business they were both in. "I need passage," she said simply. "The weather looks rough." The man didn't look up from his nets. "Passage costs more when storms are coming. 50,000. "I can pay 30 now, 30 on arrival." It was the continuation of the authentication sequence. He nodded once. "We leave in 2 hours. No luggage, no questions." Agreed. Elena retreated to a nearby cafe with a view of the docks, ordering food she didn't want and coffee she desperately needed. The exhaustion was beginning to catch up with her 48 hours of continuous operation with minimal rest, spanning 3 countries and multiple combat-ready scenarios. Even with her conditioning and experience, the human body had limits. She forced herself to eat, knowing that the journey ahead would require all her physical resources. The fishing vessel would take her to a cargo ship anchored in international waters, which would in turn transport her to the western coast of Mexico. From there, she would make her way across the border into the United States through channels established for precisely this purpose, channels that operated independently of official government oversight. If everything went according to the Phoenix Protocol, she would be back on U.S. soil within 72 hours, with no official record of her journey and no digital footprint for Incheon to follow. Assuming, of course, that the protocol itself hadn't been compromised along with everything else she had built. As the appointed departure time approached, Elena performed one final security sweep of the area, looking for any sign of surveillance or ambush. The docks appeared normal. Fishermen preparing for evening expeditions, small-scale merchants hawking the day's catch, dock workers loading and unloading modest cargoes. No one paying particular attention to the weathered fishing boat where her contact continued his methodical net repair. She approached the vessel directly, climbing aboard without ceremony. The captain nodded once in acknowledgement before returning to his preparations. 2 crew members, a younger man who shared the captain's features and an older woman with calloused hands and assessing eyes, continued their work without comment. This was the beauty of Phoenix. Everyone involved knew exactly enough and nothing more. The captain knew he was transporting a person who needed to disappear. He didn't know who she was, where she had come from, or why she needed passage. He knew only that he would be compensated generously for his discretion, and that the arrangement was part of a network that occasionally provided other benefits to his fishing operation. The boat departed as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, navigating the busy harbor with the confidence of long familiarity. Elena remained below deck in the small cabin she had been allocated, little more than a closet with a narrow bunk, but privacy was more valuable than comfort in her current situation. As the motion of the vessel changed from the chop of the harbor to the deeper rhythm of the open sea, Elena allowed herself a moment of genuine reflection. The adrenaline that had carried her through the past 2 days was ebbing, leaving space for the weight of what was happening to settle fully in her consciousness. Incheon had systematically dismantled her life's work, captured or killed the people she had recruited and trained, and was now using them as bait to draw her into a confrontation on his terms. And someone, Gordon, Harlow, or another player she hadn't yet identified, had betrayed her completely, giving Incheon the tools to accomplish all of it. The logical part of her mind, the part trained through decades of covert operations, told her to stay away from Wyoming. It was obviously a trap, designed to lure her into terrain Incheon had already prepared. Standard procedure would be to establish a new base of operations, gather intelligence from a safe distance, and approach the problem methodically. But there was another part of her, the part that had stayed awake through countless nights, remembering the faces of assets lost, operatives captured, civilians caught in the crossfire of operations gone wrong, that knew she couldn't approach this clinically. Reese, Mercer, Chen, Patel, they weren't just assets. They were people who had trusted her systems, her training, her promise that they would be protected if they followed her protocols. She had failed them by leaving, by believing she could simply walk away from the world she had helped create. And now Incheon was using them to punish her for that failure. The fishing boat continued its journey through the darkening waters, carrying her toward a confrontation 3 years in the making. Elena closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to prepare, mentally reviewing everything she knew about Colonel Min Yang-jin, everything she had learned about his methods, his psychology, his weaknesses, because when they finally met again, only one of them would walk away. And Elena was determined that this time, there would be no uncertainty about the outcome. The transfer to the cargo vessel occurred under cover of darkness, far enough from shore that they existed in the legal gray zone of international waters. Elena climbed a rope ladder thrown down from the much larger ship, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and the weapons concealed within them. The cargo ship, a Panamanian-flagged vessel transporting agricultural equipment from Asia to Central America, was part of the Phoenix network, its captain well compensated for occasionally transporting passengers who didn't appear on any manifest. Elena was shown to a small cabin normally reserved for junior officers, instructed to remain there except during designated hours when she could move about the ship without encountering the regular crew. For 3 days, she existed in this limbo, a ghost on a vessel that acknowledged her presence only through meals left outside her door and brief, wordless encounters with the first officer who had been assigned as her liaison. She used the time to rest, to plan, and to prepare herself physically for what was coming. On the evening of the 3rd day, the first officer informed her they were approaching the Mexican coast. Her transfer would occur at 0200 hours. A small boat would take her to a private beach where the next link in the Phoenix chain would be waiting. The boat that delivered her to the Mexican shoreline was little more than a motorized dinghy, operated by a single crew member who spoke no English and asked no questions. He deposited her on a deserted stretch of beach approximately 20 kilometers south of Ensenada, pointed to a dirt track leading away from the shore, and then returned to the cargo ship waiting offshore. Elena followed the track to a dilapidated building that might once have been a fish processing facility. A battered pickup truck waited outside, keys hidden in the wheel well, as specified in the protocol. Inside the building, she found a waterproof bag containing everything she needed for the next stage: clothes appropriate for the region, a Mexican driver's license and identification papers in the name of Sofia Ramirez, a prepaid mobile phone, a map with a route marked in red, and a 9mm handgun with 3 magazines of ammunition. She changed quickly, becoming Sofia Ramirez with the practiced ease of someone who had worn dozens of identities across her operational career. The drive north took approximately 5 hours, following secondary roads that avoided major checkpoints and population centers. Near the border, she abandoned the pickup at a designated location and continued on foot, using specialized equipment from the bag to defeat the perimeter sensors that monitored the less fortified stretches of the international boundary. By dawn, she was on American soil, moving through the desert landscape with the careful precision of someone who understood that the most dangerous part of any clandestine border crossing was the first 24 hours on the other side. The final link in the Phoenix chain was a small airfield outside Calexico, California, where private pilots operated with minimal oversight, flying everything from crop dusters to small charter flights for agricultural businesses and wealthy tourists. Elena's contact was a former military pilot who had found that his particular skills were more lucratively employed outside the rigid structures of government service. "Destination?" he asked as she approached his Cessna, the only acknowledgement that she was expected. "Wyoming," Elena replied. "Northeast corner, near Devil's Tower." The pilot nodded, making a show of checking his instruments while actually scanning for any sign of surveillance or law enforcement. "Weather's good. We can be there in about 6 hours with 1 refueling stop, 10,000 even." Elena handed over a thick envelope containing the agreed-upon amount in cash. "When can we leave?" "As soon as you're aboard." He gestured to the passenger's seat. "No luggage?" "Traveling light." The flight took them over some of America's most spectacular landscapes. The stark deserts of the Southwest, the dramatic elevations of the Rocky Mountains, the rolling plains that stretched toward the horizon like an ocean of grass. Elena barely noticed, her mind occupied with planning the approach to her cabin and the confrontation that would inevitably follow. Inchan would have prepared carefully. He would have studied the terrain, established defensive positions, prepared contingencies. He would be expecting her to approach cautiously, to gather intelligence before engaging, which meant her only advantage lay in doing exactly what he wouldn't expect: a direct approach, minimal preparation, maximum aggression. The kind of high-risk operation that defied conventional tactical wisdom, but occasionally succeeded precisely because of its audacity. As the plane began its descent toward the small, private airfield nearest to her property, Elena felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. The anxiety and uncertainty that had plagued her since Gordon's appearance on the mountain ridge had evaporated, replaced by the crystalline focus that had always characterized her most dangerous operations. This wasn't just about Blackfish anymore, or even about the betrayal that had exposed her network. This was about finishing something that should have ended in that North Korean tunnel 3 years earlier. A confrontation between 2 operators who represented the pinnacle of their respective agencies' capabilities. A resolution that would determine whether she could ever truly leave the life she had tried to abandon. The airfield was little more than a strip of asphalt with a small control tower and a couple of hangars for private aircraft. No commercial service, minimal security, perfect for someone who needed to arrive without attracting attention. "Need a ride into town?" the pilot asked, as they taxied toward the small terminal building. "No," Elena replied. "I know the area." In truth, she had already spotted what she needed. A dirt bike parked behind the maintenance hangar, the kind used by the field's ground crew to move quickly around the property. It would disappear shortly after her departure, another expense on the Phoenix ledger that would eventually be settled. The final approach to her cabin required all the fieldcraft she had developed over 2 decades of covert operations. The property was located in a remote area, accessible by a single dirt road that wound through dense forest before opening onto the small clearing where she had built her sanctuary. The isolation that had once represented safety now presented a tactical challenge. Limited approaches meant limited options for surprise. Elena abandoned the dirt bike 3 miles from the property, continuing on foot through the forest. She moved silently, using the techniques that had earned her the call sign Shadow, long before the 7 designation had been added. Each step was placed with deliberate precision, her passage leaving minimal disturbance to the natural environment. As she drew closer, she began to detect the subtle signs of recent activity, broken twigs that hadn't yet dried completely, impressions in the soft forest floor that rain hadn't yet erased, the faint but unmistakable scent of cigarette smoke carried on the evening breeze. Inchon had brought a team with him. Not surprising, but it complicated the scenario. She would need to identify their positions, determine their patterns, and neutralize them systematically before engaging Inchon himself. She established a concealed observation position approximately 500 meters from the cabin, using high-powered binoculars to study the property as daylight faded into dusk. The cabin appeared undisturbed from the outside, no visible damage, no obvious signs of occupation. But the curtains were drawn across all windows, preventing any view of the interior. The perimeter had been secured with professional competence, motion sensors disguised as natural features, observation posts established at key vantage points, communications equipment subtly integrated into the landscape. Elena counted at least 6 operatives patrolling in rotating shifts, their movements suggesting military training rather than intelligence backgrounds. Inside the cabin would be Inchon himself, possibly with the prisoners. The question was whether they were still alive. Keeping captives during an operation of this nature represented a tactical liability. They required resources, attention, and complicated a rapid extraction if necessary. The logical approach would be to eliminate them once they had served their purpose in luring her to this location. But Elena knew Inchon operated according to his own logic. He wouldn't have gone to all this trouble just to kill her. He wanted something more: information, confession, perhaps even redemption for the failure she had inflicted on him in Pyongyang. And he would keep at least one prisoner alive, as leverage. As darkness settled completely over the forest, Elena began to move. Not toward the cabin itself, but in a wide circle around the property, identifying and marking each security measure, each patrol route, each potential weakness in the perimeter Inchon had established. By midnight, she had compiled a comprehensive mental map of the opposition's dispositions. Their security was good, professional, methodical, thorough. But it had been designed to detect a conventional approach, not the kind of infiltration techniques she had pioneered during her years with special activities. There was a narrow window between 0200 and 0215 hours when the patrol patterns created a blind spot on the northwestern corner of the property. It would require precise timing, perfect execution, and more than a little luck, but it represented her best chance to breach the perimeter undetected. Elena checked her watch. Just over an hour to prepare, she retreated deeper into the forest, using the time to mentally rehearse every step of the approach, every contingency, every potential complication. When the designated time arrived, she moved toward the cabin with the fluid grace of a predator, each motion calculated to blend with the natural movements of the forest around her. The perimeter sensors were defeated with specialized equipment from her Phoenix package. The first guard was neutralized silently from behind, lowered gently to the ground to avoid alerting his colleagues. The second fell to a precisely aimed tranquilizer dart, as he turned to check a noise Elena had deliberately created as a distraction. She was inside the defensive perimeter now, moving from shadow to shadow across the open ground that surrounded her cabin. The structure loomed ahead, dark and silent, except for a faint glow visible through the drawn curtains of what she knew to be the living room. The cabin's design included a feature known only to her, a concealed entrance beneath the rear deck, accessing a small cellar originally intended as a storm shelter. If Inchon's intelligence was as comprehensive as she feared, he would know about it, would have secured it as thoroughly as the main entrances. But she had to try. It represented the only approach that might allow her to enter undetected. Elena reached the cabin's rear deck, moving beneath it with agonizing slowness to minimize any sound. The access hatch was located behind what appeared to be a standard ventilation grate, a design specifically chosen to appear unremarkable to casual observation. The grate was still in place, showing no signs of tampering. Either Inchon hadn't discovered this entrance, or he had identified it and was allowing it to remain as a trap. Elena examined it minutely, looking for any evidence of alarm systems or triggering mechanisms. Finding none that she could detect, she carefully removed the grate and examined the hatch itself. The lock was intact, the dust around it undisturbed. Taking a calculated risk, she used her key to unlock it, easing the hatch open with millimeter precision to prevent any sound. The cellar beyond was dark and apparently empty. Elena slipped inside, closing the hatch behind her with the same meticulous care she had used to open it. She stood motionless for several minutes, allowing her eyes to adjust to the darkness and her other senses to detect any presence that might be concealed within the small space. Satisfied that she was alone, she moved to the interior access, a disguised panel that opened onto the cabin's main floor through what appeared to be a storage closet. This would be the most dangerous moment of the infiltration. If Inchon had discovered the cellar access, he would have the interior exit under surveillance. Elena pressed her ear against the panel, listening for any sound that might indicate a presence on the other side. Hearing nothing, she carefully disengaged the locking mechanism and eased the panel open fractionally, creating a gap just wide enough to observe a portion of the cabin's interior. The closet beyond appeared empty. She opened the panel further, slipping through with the liquid grace that had become second nature through years of covert operations. Inside the closet, she paused again, listening to the ambient sounds of the cabin, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the structure settling, and a new sound, the faint but unmistakable rhythm of human breathing. Someone was in the main room, either asleep or waiting in complete stillness. Elena drew her weapon, a suppressed 9mm that would allow her to engage if necessary, without alerting the external security team. She eased the closet door open fractionally, gaining a limited view of the cabin's main living area. A single lamp illuminated the space, casting long shadows across the familiar furnishings that now seemed alien in the context of the current situation. Seated in an armchair facing the front door, perfectly centered in the room as if staged for maximum dramatic effect, was Colonel Min-Young-jin Inchon. He appeared exactly as she remembered him, perhaps with a few more lines around his eyes, a touch more gray at his temples. His posture was relaxed but alert, his hands resting comfortably on the arms of the chair. He wore civilian clothes of Western style and excellent quality, a concession to his current environment rather than a reflection of any actual assimilation. Most disturbingly, he appeared to be completely alone. No guards, no prisoners, no obvious weapons beyond a handgun holstered at his side. The scene projected absolute confidence, as if he had no doubt about the outcome of this encounter. "You can come out now, Shadow 7, he said calmly, his voice carrying the same precise English she remembered from their previous encounters. "Or do you prefer Elena these days?" Elena remained completely still, her mind racing to process this unexpected development. Inchon had been waiting for her, had known she would use the concealed entrance, which meant either his intelligence was even more comprehensive than she had feared, or your team did an admirable job preparing this place. Inchon continued conversationally, as if they were old friends meeting after a long absence. The hidden access points, the security measures disguised as ordinary features, the escape routes carefully integrated into the natural landscape. It's quite impressive. I would expect nothing less from Shadow 7. He gestured to the chair opposite his. "Please join me. After 3 years, I believe we've earned a civilized conversation before the inevitable conclusion." Elena calculated her options with cold precision. She could engage immediately, but Inchan's relaxed demeanor suggested confidence in his position. No visible nervousness, no excess tension in his posture. He believed he held the advantage, and the missing prisoners complicated matters significantly. She stepped fully into the room, weapon trained steadily on Inchan's chest. "Where are they?" He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes with what appeared to be genuine amusement. "Ah, direct as always. Your operatives are alive, if that's your concern. Their continued well-being depends entirely on how our conversation proceeds." "You've gone to extraordinary lengths for a conversation, Colonel." Elena remained standing, maintaining tactical positioning that gave her clear sightlines to all entrances. 3 years of planning, 4 abducted intelligence officers, an international manhunt. Most people would just send an email. Inchan's laugh was brief but apparently sincere. Most people didn't have a building collapsed on them by a woman who then disappeared from existence. You made quite an impression in Pyongyang. You weren't supposed to survive that. Clearly. He gestured to a thin scar that ran from his right temple down to his jaw, partially concealed by expertly applied cosmetics but visible in the cabin's soft lighting. 12 surgeries and 18 months of rehabilitation. Your explosive work was quite thorough. Elena's expression remained neutral, but internally she was reassessing everything about the current situation. Inchan had survived injuries that should have been fatal, had devoted years to tracking her down, and had orchestrated an elaborate operation spanning multiple countries, all to arrange this meeting. "What do you want, Colonel?" "Please, call me Min. I believe we've moved beyond formalities." He adjusted his position slightly, a minute movement that nevertheless commanded attention. "What I want is surprisingly simple. I want to understand." "Understand what?" "Why you left." His tone shifted, a subtle but perceptible change from conversational to something more intense. "Not just the operational theater. I understand tactical withdrawals. Not just your agency. Political considerations make such transitions necessary. But why you left? Everything. Your identity. Your purpose. The very thing that defined you." The question struck, with unexpected precision, finding a vulnerability Elena hadn't realized was exposed. She maintained her professional composure, but something in Inchan's expression suggested he had detected the impact of his words. "You tracked me across 3 continents, compromised my network, and abducted my operatives to ask about my career choices." Her tone was deliberately dismissive. "I expected something more substantive." "Did you?" Inchan leaned forward slightly. "I don't think you did. I think you've been asking yourself the same question every day since you walked away. I think you've been waiting for someone to demand an explanation, not for leaving the field, but for betraying what you were born to be." Elena felt a cold certainty settling in her stomach. This wasn't just about operational revenge or intelligence gathering. This was something far more personal, far more dangerous. "Where are my people, men?" He acknowledged the deflection with a slight nod. "Currently enjoying the hospitality of a secure facility approximately 12 miles from here. They are unharmed, though understandably concerned about their circumstances." "And your team outside?" "Professionals contracted for a specific purpose. They have no knowledge of who you are or why I'm here. Merely that the perimeter was to be secured and that I required privacy for a meeting." Elena's tactical assessment shifted again. If Inchan was telling the truth, and his body language suggested he was, then this confrontation was genuinely intended to be private. Which raised the question of what exactly he expected to happen after their, quote, civilized conversation. "Sit, Elena," he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "If you intended to kill me immediately, you would have done so from the closet. And if I intended to kill you, I wouldn't have announced my awareness of your presence." The logic was sound. Elena moved to the indicated chair, maintaining her grip on her weapon but lowering it slightly, a tactical compromise that acknowledged the current impasse while preserving her options for rapid response. 3 minutes, she said. "Then I want coordinates for my people." Inchan nodded acceptance of her terms. "When I recovered sufficiently to resume my duties, I discovered something interesting. The operation that brought you to Pyongyang, the extraction of Dr. Park and his research materials, had been compromised before you ever arrived. Not by my counterintelligence efforts, but by someone within your own agency. Elena's expression revealed nothing, but her mind was immediately connecting this information with the betrayal of Blackfish. Continue. Dr. Park was never the primary target. His research was valuable, yes, but it was already largely documented in academic channels. What certain elements within your government wanted was evidence of a specific weapons program. Evidence that didn't exist, but which could justify particular foreign policy objectives. And when I succeeded in extracting Park despite the compromise, you became a liability. Incheon finished. Someone who had seen too much, who might eventually realize that the mission parameters you'd been given were designed to fail, to create an international incident rather than prevent one. The pieces were falling into place with disturbing clarity. Her extraction from field operations immediately after Pyongyang, the insistence that she accept a desk position where she could be monitored, the convenient, quote, catastrophic mission failure in Karachi when she had refused to be sidelined. Director Harlow, she said, the name emerging as both question and accusation. Incheon's slight nod confirmed her suspicion, among others. A faction within your intelligence community with particular ideas about how relations with my country should proceed. Dr. Park's defection with evidence of prohibited weapons research would have provided the justification they needed for a significant policy shift. And when I brought him out without any such evidence, you became the loose end that needed tying up. Incheon's expression held something almost like respect. They arranged Karachi as an elegant solution, a heroic death that removed you from the equation while preserving your reputation. Elena processed this information with the detached analysis of a professional intelligence officer, compartmentalizing the personal implications to focus on the operational significance. That doesn't explain how you found me or why you dismantled Blackfish. Finding you was surprisingly simple once I knew what to look for. The same faction that arranged your convenient death in Karachi kept detailed records of the true extraction. Operational security at that level is often more concerned with eliminating external threats than internal documentation. He paused. As for Blackfish, I needed to confirm my theory about who had really orchestrated the Pyongyang operation. Your network provided the perfect pressure point. You used my people as bait. Elena's voice carried a dangerous edge. I used them as a means to an end. Incheon corrected. Just as your agency used you. The difference is that I intend to release them unharmed once our business is concluded. And what exactly is our business, Colonel? Elena's use of his formal title was deliberate, a reassertion of the professional distance he had been attempting to erode. Incheon reached slowly into his jacket, telegraphing the movement to avoid triggering a defensive reaction. He withdrew a small data drive, placing it on the table between them. This contains everything I've uncovered about the faction within your government that arranged the Pyongyang deception and your subsequent death. Names, communications, financial transactions, operational details spanning the past 5 years. He tapped the drive once, including their most recent activities, which suggest they are preparing a similar operation with potentially catastrophic consequences for relations between our countries. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. Why would you give me this? Because contrary to what your intelligence briefings might suggest, I am not a warmonger. I am a patriot who believes that stability serves my country's interests better than conflict. His expression hardened. And because I do not appreciate being used as a pawn in someone else's game, any more than you do. The calculation behind his words was evident, but Elena sensed something else beneath the strategic reasoning, a genuine indignation at being manipulated. A professional pride that had been wounded by the realization that he had been operating on a board designed by others. 3 years is a long time to nurse a grudge minimum. It wasn't just about the grudge, though I won't deny that played a part. He gestured to the scar on his face. It was about understanding what had really happened. Why a legendary operative with an unblemished record of successful extractions would suddenly make a series of tactical decisions that contradicted everything in her operational history. Elena remained silent, neither confirming nor denying his assessment. You suspected something was wrong with the Pyongyang mission, didn't you? Incheon pressed. That's why you deviated from the extraction plan, why you used unusual routes, why you disabled the tracking systems on your equipment. You sensed the compromise, even if you didn't know its source. The accuracy of his analysis was unsettling. Elena had indeed modified the standard protocols during that operation, acting on an instinct she couldn't fully articulate at the time, a sense that something about the mission parameters didn't align with the stated objectives. "If what you're saying is true," she said carefully, "then releasing this information would make you a traitor to your own government. Why would you take that risk?" "Because the same faction that manipulated your agency has counterparts in mine. People who believe that controlled conflict serves their interests better than peaceful coexistence." His voice took on an edge of genuine conviction. "I've spent my career defending my country against external threats. I will not stand by while internal actors create artificial crises for personal or political gain." Elena studied him, searching for any sign of deception. His body language remained consistent with his stated position, conviction without the telltale indicators of fabrication. Either he was telling the truth, or he was an even more accomplished operative than his reputation suggested. "The drive," she said, nodding toward it without reaching for it. "What specifically does it contain?" "Evidence of an operation codenamed Silent Vanguard, a false flag attack on a U.S. intelligence asset in Seoul, designed to appear as the work of my government's Special Operations Division." His expression was grim, scheduled for execution in approximately 72 hours. The time frame explained the urgency of his actions, the accelerated dismantling of Blackfish, the elaborate measures to ensure this meeting took place now rather than later. If he was telling the truth, they were rapidly approaching a point of no return. "And my operatives? What guarantee do I have that they'll be released if I agree to pursue this?" "You have my word," Inchon said simply, "which I recognize means very little in our profession, so I've arranged something more concrete." He reached into his pocket again, withdrawing a phone. "Coordinates to their location have been programmed into this device. It also contains a direct line to the team leader securing them, with authorization codes that will instruct him to release them immediately." He placed the phone beside the data drive. "You can verify their condition before deciding whether to act on the information I've provided." Elena weighed her options. If Inchon was telling the truth, then she was being offered an opportunity to prevent a significant international incident, while simultaneously exposing the faction that had arranged her false death. If he was lying, she was being manipulated into becoming an unwitting agent of North Korean intelligence. But there was a third possibility, that he was telling a partial truth, using real intelligence about a genuine threat to advance an agenda that served his own purposes. In her experience, this was the most dangerous form of deception, precisely because it contained enough verifiable elements to establish credibility. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Why not take this to your own superiors, or to official channels within the U.S. intelligence community?" "Because official channels are precisely where this operation has been incubated," Inchon replied. "And because you have a unique combination of skills, motivation, and deniability. You're officially dead, which means your actions can't be traced back to any government agency. You have the operational expertise to verify the intelligence independently before acting on it. And you have a personal stake in exposing the people who arranged your extraction from the field." The logic was sound, which made Elena even more cautious. Well-constructed reasoning often concealed deeper motivations. "And what happens after?" she pressed. "Assuming I verify your intelligence, expose this operation, and prevent the attack. What then?" Quote. "Then we return to our respective lives." Inchon's expression suggested he recognized the implausibility of his own statement. "Or, more realistically, we acknowledge that our encounter here creates a unique dynamic that neither of us can fully predict. I don't expect us to become allies, Elena, but perhaps we can be something other than enemies." She considered his words carefully, analyzing them for hidden meanings or deceptions. What she found instead was something unexpected. A genuine offer of professional respect, one operative to another, acknowledging the reality of their opposed loyalties while suggesting the possibility of a more nuanced relationship. "I'll need proof of life for my operatives before I make any decisions." Inchon nodded, activating the phone and opening a video call application. After a brief conversation in Korean with the person who answered, he turned the screen toward Elena. The image showed a secure room where 4 people, Reese, Chen, Patel, and Mercer, were seated at a table with food and water. They appeared tired but uninjured, their expressions reflecting confusion rather than terror. Incheon handed her the phone. "Speak to them." Elena took the device, addressing her operatives in a clear, steady voice. "Authorization code Sierra Tango 79. Status report." Each operative responded in turn, using predetermined phrases that confirmed they were under duress but not in immediate danger. The communication protocols they had established years earlier functioning exactly as designed. 72 hours, Elena said, returning the phone to Incheon. "You'll release them immediately, and I'll verify the intelligence on this drive. If it checks out, I'll take appropriate action to prevent the operation you've described. And if it doesn't check out, then I'll find you again," she said simply. "And our next conversation won't be nearly as civilized." Incheon accepted this with a slight nod. Fair enough. He stood slowly, maintaining the deliberate movements that had characterized their entire interaction. The security team outside has been instructed to withdraw at 0400 hours. You'll have clear passage to retrieve your operatives at the coordinates provided. He moved toward the door, then paused. "One last question, if I may. Why Wyoming? Of all the places you could have disappeared to, why here?" Elena considered whether to answer, whether this personal detail was one she was willing to share with a man who had been her adversary and might well be again. Something in his expression, a genuine curiosity rather than tactical information gathering, decided her. "My father brought me here once, when I was very young, before everything changed. It was the last place I remember feeling normal." She met his gaze directly. "Sometimes the best place to disappear is somewhere that already exists in your history, somewhere that feels like it belongs to a different version of yourself." Incheon nodded, a gesture that conveyed understanding beyond words. "Goodbye, Elena. Or perhaps just until next time." He exited the cabin without looking back, leaving her alone with the data drive, the phone, and the weight of decisions that would shape not just her future but potentially the relationship between nations. Elena remained seated for several minutes after his departure, her mind working through the implications of everything she had learned. If Incheon was telling the truth, and her instincts suggested he was, at least partially, then her entire understanding of the past 3 years needed to be reconsidered. The faction within U.S. intelligence that had arranged her extraction from the field hadn't been protecting a valuable asset, as she'd been led to believe. They had been eliminating a potential threat to their broader agenda. And that agenda apparently included manufacturing conflicts with North Korea for purposes that remained unclear but were almost certainly not aligned with official U.S. foreign policy. Which meant Gordon's sudden reappearance in her life and his urgent request for assistance with Blackfish took on an entirely different significance. Had he been working with this faction all along? Or had he been manipulated just as she had been? The questions multiplied, each with profound implications for how she would proceed. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Her retirement from operational service had been premature. Whether she had chosen it or had it thrust upon her, the quiet life she had built in Wyoming had been nothing more than an interlude, a temporary respite from the world she had been trained to navigate. Shadow 7 had never truly disappeared. She had simply been waiting, dormant, for the moment when she would be needed again. Elena picked up the data drive, weighing it thoughtfully in her palm. The first step was clear. Verify Incheon's intelligence independently, confirm the existence of Operation Silent Vanguard and its imminent timeline. If it proved accurate, she would need to move quickly to prevent an attack designed to trigger international crisis. But beyond that immediate mission lay a more complex challenge. The faction Incheon had identified represented a cancer within the intelligence community, manipulating international relations for their own purposes. Exposing them would require all the skills she had developed over her operational career, along with resources she no longer had access to through official channels. She would need to rebuild her network, establish new alliances, create an operational infrastructure that existed completely outside government oversight. In essence, she would need to become what she had spent her career fighting against, a non-state intelligence actor pursuing objectives defined by her own assessment rather than official policy. The irony wasn't lost on her. After years dedicated to serving her country's interests as defined by her superiors, she now faced the prospect of operating against elements within that same power structure in order to protect what she believed to be the nation's true interests. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Elena made her decision. She pocketed the data drive and the phone, gathered the essential items she would need for the operation ahead, and took one last look around the cabin that had been her sanctuary. She would not be returning. This chapter of her life was definitively closed. What opened before her was something new, not a return to her former role, but the evolution of it. Not Shadow 7 as she had been, but as she needed to become. Outside, the forest was coming alive with morning sounds, birds announcing the new day, small animals rustling through underbrush, the whisper of wind through pine needles. Elena moved through this awakening world with renewed purpose, her stride confident and determined. The Green Beret's question had been answered. Shadow 7 hadn't simply disappeared, she had transformed. And in that transformation lay not just her own redemption but potentially the key to preventing a crisis that threatened to engulf nations. As she disappeared into the morning mist, Elena Diaz, Shadow 7, carried with her the weight of her past decisions and the promise of those yet to come. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and entirely necessary. Just like the woman who walked it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.